Hello and welcome to Leaders of Tomorrow, India's largest platform for entrepreneurs. We bring you expert advice on how to make and manage your money right. Also, expert advice on hiring right, innovation, strategy, in fact, anything and everything that matters to the life of an entrepreneur. We cover it right here on the show. Tonight, I'm in conversation with two young entrepreneurs to talk to them about their personal journeys and also their advice for their peers. I want to welcome in Amruta Velumani and Pranavs Pai. Amruta, Pranav, thank you so much for your time here on the show. Pranav, let me come to you first and ask you to talk to our viewers about some of the highlights of your journey have been. It's not very often that we see someone as young as yourself who's in the world of private equity and venture capital financing. So I'm really curious for you to talk to our viewers about the highlights of your journey.
Thanks, Nanda. So when we surveyed the landscape starting 2011, we were just starting to see the formation of what you would call the technology startup ecosystem in India that we know very well in 2020. The first big companies were scaling out. You might remember Flipkart, Mu Sigma, Baiju started in 2012. So we were fortunate from our previous experiences to see the formation of this ecosystem. So as we surveyed the first half of the decade, we realized that in the early stages, there's going to be a lot more demand for specialist Indian capital. There's going to be demand for fund managers who actually build startups, work in technology, can bring grounds up experience to founders to help them build these generational companies. So when we launched our first fund in 2015, 2016, we kind of accumulated all of these experiences and pulled them together to build a very top tier experience for founders trying to do something audacious. Since 2015, we've managed to raise 4 funds. We're right now closing our 5th. We will manage $210 million when we close our 5th fund in 2021. So it's been a fantastic ride over the last half a decade or a little bit more. Coming to our actual experiences, I think 2 big learnings for us as we work with dozens of founding teams. We've now invested in over 60 companies over the last 5 years. I think number one, very interesting thing we've observed is India is now the single largest theater of startup opportunities compared to any other region in the world. Only 2 other countries, the US and China, are ahead of India in terms of size and scale. India closed $14.5 billion in venture funding last year. We're third in the world, again, only behind the US and China. And really, when you look at the overlays of problems, talent, capital, and technology to solve these problems, the install base of technology, smartphones, data connection, everything you need to build a real ecosystem. India is the single largest theater where all these opportunities are coming together right now. And the nature of our opportunities are still large, still horizontal, and still multi-industry, meaning across segments. So it's been a fantastic decade. I think the next decade, the decade we're starting now, will be even more interesting. Certainly from 314, we're very excited for what's to come.
Amrita, you of course, are taking forward a very well-established business, but you've taken it forward, bringing in your own style, bringing in your own learnings. How have you really managed to do that? And you can really talk to our viewers from your experience and what that journey for you has been.
So Sunanda, to start with, I would not call myself as an entrepreneur because my father has started this business. So I am the second generation of promoter in this company. There has been a lot of learning because when I came, they were completely family-held business. And then we went into private equity and then we have seen the company go public. So it has been a great experience. I've almost close to finished 10 years working in this company full-time. First of all, you need to first, like my father said, SB, AD, that was the first thing he taught us was, "Sita beto, apna dekho aur mehnat karo." So that is the first thing, he taught us how to sit straight and start working and working hard. Before you can get work done, you need to learn how to do the work. So that was the thing that I learned when I came inside. And it has been a lot of learning experiences in terms of what is set, how to take it further ahead, because, you can grow a baby into an adult, but how to grow an adult further up is a different kind of a journey. So, I've been learning that. And in the last 10 years, there have been various projects and various, obviously the investments that came inside. So the complexion of the company has changed and the way we are seen by the public eye and the way we are perceived has completely changed. So, there are a lot of learnings that have come. The company, when I came in, was somewhere around 80 crores was when I joined. And today we are doing close to 500 crores of turnover and listed in the stock exchange. So a lot of experiences and growing the team that was around 200 members to today we are around closing around 2,000 people in the team. So, that has also been an experience. So I've grown with the company and it's been a lot of experiences around that.
Pranav, there's a lot of challenges when setting up a new business. On one of the things that then comes into focus, of course, is innovation. Talk to our viewers about the impetus which is really placed on innovation, and what your experience has been about innovating and learning on the job.
Definitely, Sunanda. I think one of the first things we've seen as investors is the first wave of big companies that were built as startups, the e-commerce companies, the payment companies, companies in the mobility space. These were companies that had to rebuild a lot of the fundamental building blocks underneath their business. The logistics piece, the payments piece, a lot of the other things that are required to run the end value proposition. So they had to actually do a lot more work to end up building what they were always aiming to build. What's happening now in the second wave is a lot of the fundamental architecture that you need to build a startup today is a solved problem. And I think India has gone much more beyond. As a state, we have a public good infrastructure like UPI, Aadhaar, so on and so forth, that very few other countries have at this scale. So to answer your question, I think today the second wave of companies being built, these are much more specialist teams. They have much more experience. They have worked at startups before, or they have over a decade of experience in technology companies, large MNCs, global ideas. So they come with a much deeper understanding of the specialist domains that they're attacking. They come with a much more respect for capital. They're much more selective about whose capital they will take. There are more investors in 2020 compared to even 5 years back in the venture ecosystem. So now the best founders have choice. They're going to be more selective. They're going to be more careful. So really, we're seeing a fantastic rate of evolution when it comes to the kind of founding teams, the quality of the talent, and of course, the end product, the quality of the companies being built. To answer your second question on the challenges, I think we still have two primary challenges in India when you compare the Indian ecosystem to the rest of the world. Number one, the two other large startup ecosystems, the US and China, only two countries are larger than us, bigger than us, so we must always compare to them. If you've seen how they've built up, the kind of prowess they have today, it's taken tens of billions of dollars top-down investment from the government through very focused programs, DARPA, InQtel, AI funds set up in China per district. They have invested tens of billions of dollars to build up the capacity that they have as of today. The Indian government, while it's done fantastic work, we have not invested that scale of capital yet. Therefore, India still has some ways to catch up to global competition when it comes to that kind of capital being available from the state. The second challenge today we have when you compare us to the rest of the world is India is still a very open market. In fact, we're one of the most open scale markets in the world. And that's why when you're starting a company in 2020 today, you're not just competing with Indian startups or Indian companies, you're competing with global companies. So it's going to be very hard for an Indian social network to start in 2020 and compete with the big companies that are already the dominant social networks in the world across every geography that you can imagine.
Pranav, as someone who works so closely with startups, the impact that the pandemic has had on startups, what would you like to sort of flag off for our entrepreneurs?
It's been a very interesting 2020, Sunanda. In 2019, just to recap, the Indian VC ecosystem raised a record amount of funding. I mentioned $14 billion before. So most of the top companies in every category in the startup ecosystem entered 2020 with a reasonably strong balance sheet, right? So that's important. They seem to be a little bit more prepared for what was to come. Of course, no one can predict a pandemic, but when it really hit India, you will remember that 3 or 4 things were happening at the same time. Of course, we had the lockdown, and therefore a lot of the operations had to be reimagined, working from home, deliveries needing to be very closely guarded. Of course, on-premise work was more difficult. So a lot of the fundamental operations of many of these companies had to be rethought. I should say startups have done a fantastic job of being very agile, moving very quickly, and making sure there's business continuity for as many of their operations as possible across the country. So I think a combination of strong balance sheets and of course an ability to be agile and react quickly has helped most startups recover extremely quickly from what happened due to the lockdown. Now, as we're seeing the unlock 1, unlock 2, unlock 3, and so on across the country, we're seeing startups actually bounce back much faster than most people imagine. And therefore, I'm not surprised to see that $6.7 billion of VC funding has already come into Indian companies Jan to September 2020. We are only $1.5 billion behind the same period in 2019, which is a record year. So while we imagine a slowdown in funding also, it seems that funding has come back. It seems like all the top companies again are able to raise money at larger valuations. You would have seen over a dozen announcements over the last quarter. So it's been a very interesting 2020 to see startups reacted in an agile way. I think startup founders have reacted very maturely. I think they've protected the health of their employees. They've ensured business continuity when possible. So I think it's a very good sign to see that the Indian ecosystem has certainly matured much faster than most people imagine.
Okay, I'm going to take a quick break on that note. We'll come back with much more. To stay tuned. Welcome back. You're with us here on Leaders of Tomorrow. Tonight, we're in conversation with Amruta Velumani and Pranav Pai. I want to talk about strategy and innovation from the point of view of facing a crisis and in the time of a crisis. Pranav and Amruta, this question is to both of you. If you can talk about, pivoting really, at what point you learn to pivot, innovation, strategy, and how you're able to seamlessly bring all of this about if you need to relook at your strategy at the business.
I think the top three decisions we saw promoters and founders make is how they changed and set an organizational structure, really, to deal with this kind of disruption and to, of course, be more resilient in the future. Most startups that we're working with have radically rethought their organizational design, and that's giving them the preparation to really be a little bit more forward compliant. Number two, I'm seeing a unanimous respect for capital come back in the startup ecosystem. Every company we know is more careful about cash, they're more careful about where they're spending their money, they're more careful about collections, discipline, they're more careful about making sure they keep their board, their shareholders better informed. So a collective cohesion of the shareholders and the promoters at the board level. Really, that's fantastic to see. I think that gives companies a much stronger, more discipline as they attack their markets going forward. So really, COVID has been an interesting reason for everyone to pull together and help build a wall of resilience around the founding team, the promoters, and the entire company. The third thing I'm seeing change, really, is now how large companies in India, the big corporations, the legacy companies, what is called the old economy, how they are now adopting technology. Everyone in India has realized that needing to be digital is now, there's no more debate. It's now almost a fundamental assumption that if your business does not have a digital component, you are not ready to meet what's likely to come in the future. So that has increased the demand for local technology, that's increased the partnership ability for startups to work with large corporations in India, and that's been a phenomenal turn, a very positive turn, a turn for the best. So these are the three things we've seen change very quickly over the last 6 to 8 months.
Three things that we saw in COVID that has changed for us is, one, employees doing work from home. Which was not earlier even thought of it is possible because, you're in service, you're in healthcare. So, your lab person is coming to the office every day. So you want, an organization that is sitting in one place and working. So that was a major change for us. So when we realized that there are certain roles that can be done work from home, provided the technology supports, we shifted them over a period of time into work from home roles. That has given us access to the talent which is pan-India. So anyone who has an internet today can be our employee for a couple of roles in the company. So that was one thing we saw change. And the second thing we saw change was there are more number of home collections that are happening, which was not happening earlier. The typical mindset was I want a blood test done. So where do I go? Today it's like I want a blood test done. So who do I call home? That is a change which we have seen, and that is also helping us to overall bring down the cost because there are more number of collections that are happening per pin code or per kilometer stretch. That is helping, like the Swiggy boys have more number of drops, so the cost of delivery is lesser. Similarly, the cost of collection is also coming down and will come down further when home collections increase. And the third is we have adopted more of technology. We have today software-based approvals. We have more of software-based operations that are run, and we have migrated almost 40% of our company into an app-based operation. Which was earlier completely a desktop-based operation. So even if I want an approval, I have to open my laptop and then get into the browser and then only approve that, or come next day to the office and only work on a paper. So the digital movement has been much faster than what it would have happened in the company. What could have happened in 5 years has happened in 5 months. To put it that way. So these are three things that we saw has changed.
Pranav, looking at then how the year is likely to pan out, while it's difficult, of course, to do any crystal ball gazing, given that we're still in this time of COVID and the after effects really of that. If there are one or two trends or industries or sectors or picks that you would like to give our viewers, someone watching this interview, that you think are going to really pick up going forward, what would those be?
Certainly, I think one definitive global trend is the demand for technology assets globally. Unlisted, listed, venture, scale, all over the world has gone up to levels that most people thought was impossible. We now have $2 trillion companies in the US, Apple, Microsoft, Amazon, and so on. So I expect a similar trend to happen in India. So I think the first real global opportunity, meaning everyone in India will have access to this, the next set of IPOs to happen from the startup ecosystem. As all of us know, at least 8 to 10 companies are preparing for that. Certainly, I would recommend all investors in India to keep an eye on these companies as they prepare for an IPO over the next couple of years. From a startup perspective, I would say the acceleration we've seen in education, that is giving confidence to a lot more old economy or legacy companies to start adopting technology and partner with startups. So we expect similar exponential growth in health now. A lot of very new business models are waiting for government approval, and I expect that should be an interesting category to keep on top of. And we're also seeing now a tremendous interest for Indian SaaS companies to go global. And going global just doesn't mean to the US and Europe anymore. It means going to Southeast Asia, going to the Middle East, being an Asia-first SaaS company, for example. So we see that demand for these assets now across the continent is increasing, and Indian companies should be leading that march. Certainly, health and SaaS are two areas we think are going to become much more interesting in 2020 as we enter 2021.
Both of you have famous fathers. What have you both learned from them? And what have you perhaps unlearned and needed to unlearn perhaps as you brought in your own style of working?
Like my father is very well known for his punchlines and the knowledge he shares. So there's just too many to put it just put one. But then one thing is, he's been very persistent on his focus. He actually lives by that. So not learned from him just in words. I've seen him really focused, and he says a word in Hindi, "Lage raho." So really learn that, and that really helps in anything you start and you want to really see it go live. So focus. And one thing which we had to unlearn, which is more of change in the economy, change in the way the ecosystem works, and also obviously the traditional businesses work, is not just hire someone and tell them what to do, and instead hire people who can specialize in certain aspect. Even if you're hiring an amateur, helping him to specialize in certain aspect and then allow him to work and give him that space which can contribute in the business, versus you driving every single aspect of a big company and still seeing a big change. That's not going to happen. You have to have more muscle driving the business versus just your muscle which you keep on trying to develop.
Pranav, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, the top two things that come to mind, Sunanda. Number one is venture capital specifically is known to be an old boys club. It's very hard for young people and women. This problem has been well written about globally, not just in India, but all countries across the world. What we learned from MDP first is just how to think in decades. Siddharth and I were both in our 20s when we launched 314's first fund. We are ready to do this over 20, 30 years now, because these are real decadal journeys. We don't build fantastic companies in 2 or 3 years. We can't exit like we do in the public markets. So to train yourself to think in decades when you're in your 20s, I think that would be very hard to do without someone like MDP really giving us the right kind of inputs and setting the right kind of boundaries. I think the second most important thing we learned from him is how important it is to be patient and how important it is to be patient with integrity. Most people who lose money in the game, they do it because they lose patience or they try to cut corners. We've learned, of course, the hard way, with not just his example, but all the founders of Infosys, all the big industrialists who come before, specifically in IT, They build large billion-dollar companies over decades. That's the kind of lesson that we've taken very seriously at 314, not just for ourselves, but we also share these values with the companies we invest. So certainly these are the top two things that come to mind.
All right, Pranav Pai, Amruta Velumani, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Completely out of time on this episode. If you have any feedback for us, our contact details on your screens as we speak. Thank you so much for watching. Have a good night.